What's going on, YouTube and horror movie buffs? I'm your host Marcus, and welcome to I Shot Him 6 Times YouTube horror movie channel. Be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel, as well as hit that notification icon so you get all the latest content updates from the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing / questioning how did Sidney Prescott know that Sam Carpenter was Billy Loomis's daughter in Scream 5. Before I get into it, let's hit that intro. I shot him 6 times. Alright guys, so as I said at the top of the video, I want to discuss or question how did Sidney Prescott know that Sam Carpenter was the daughter of Billy Loomis? The reason why I bring this dialogue into question is because, as I stated in my last video that I posted yesterday about Dewey not even knowing about Sam being Billy's daughter, and he was the sheriff and lived in Woodsboro much longer than Cindy and Gail, and he didn't even know that Sam was Billy's daughter. Now, why this is significant that Cindy knows is because how does she know? Dewey didn't tell her. Just like I said yesterday about Dewey not telling Gail, there was no dialogue whatsoever that Dewey mentions Sam's name while on the phone to Cindy when he's texting Gail, and you can see the text messages he's sending her. And then when Gail comes to Woodsboro and they meet up at the scene of Judy Hicks' death scene. So why this is significant is because, one, how the hell does Cindy know? That's the main thing. How does Cindy know that Sam is Billy's daughter? Especially when there was no dialogue for it. Okay, so there was this running theory leading up to the 5th movie about the love child of Sidney Prescott and Billy Loomis, that obviously the night, of 96 Stu's house, they obviously had sex. She conceived a child, maybe gave that child up for adoption, etc., etc., etc. And me personally, I was like, I don't know how I felt about that. Didn't really know if that would make so much sense. Didn't know how that would play into the storyline. But given how everything's starting to play out, especially how I'm starting to view things, that is not an impossible theory. And this is why I say that. Okay, so when people could say, oh, well, that's impossible. Obviously Melissa Barrera is Hispanic. The mother, her mother would have to be Hispanic, or, in order, for her to be Hispanic, because obviously Billy is Caucasian, etc., etc. But it's not impossible for a movie to pass a real life, person of ethnicity off as a Caucasian character, or as, black character, whatever you want to call it. You seen Robert Downey Jr. do blackface, or basically play a black man in Tropic Thunder. So it's not impossible that Sam's character, even though obviously in real life she is, Hispanic, or, if I'm not mistaken, Mexican American, one of those two. It's not impossible to think that just for her character in this movie and Scream, that she turns out to just be all Caucasian. And the reason I say this is because the dialogue between her and Cindy, when Cindy approaches her and says, yeah, you're Billy's daughter. Well, how else would Cindy know that if Cindy isn't really her mother? If there was no dialogue between Gail, Dewey, about her being Billy's daughter, there is no other explanation, really, if you think about it. How would Cindy know that that's Billy's daughter? Unless they all kept it a secret for so long and just never mentioned it between, Gail, Dewey, and Cindy. But then even if that's the case, they would have to know at some point it was going to get, that was going to come back to haunt them. So I doubt that's, the case at all. I am starting to lean on the theory that it's not impossible that this is what we could possibly have with this situation. What if Cindy did, obviously get pregnant that night when, at Stu's house, decided to give the kid, Sam, up for adoption, and the woman who, Sam's mom, if I'm not mistaken, Jen Carpenter, Sam's mom, because she was so in love with Billy, maybe somehow found out about the kid being up for adoption, and decided, to adopt her and pass her as her own, because she was so obsessed with Billy and so in love with Billy that he's dead. She wanted some piece of him still. And that's not impossible, because we all know how this, Scream franchise has so many homages to the Halloween franchise, etc. And we've seen in Rob Zombie's Halloween, with Sheriff Brackett's character, when, obviously the mother kills herself, he decides to take the baby and take it to the Strode family, and they adopted her. So it would not surprise me if something like this is along those lines is happening, because there's just no other explanation as to how does Cindy know that Sam is Billy's daughter. There is no other explanation. There was no dialogue, like I said, between Gail, Dewey, Cindy, Dewey, Cindy, Dewey to Gail. There was no dialogue about Sam being Billy's daughter whatsoever. And as I stated in yesterday's video, Dewey didn't even know. At least they portrayed it as if Dewey didn't know that who the hell Sam was, and that Sam was, Billy's daughter. So this was something that really, really caught my eye in this movie. This piece of dialogue when Cindy goes up to Sam and she's like, hey, yeah, you're Billy's daughter. And I'm just like, well, how does she know that? Dewey didn't even know that. Gail didn't even mention that when, her and Sam first met. It's not impossible to think now that possibly what we have is that Cindy Prescott could possibly be the real maternal mother of Sam Carpenter Loomis. And that after, finding out she was pregnant to Billy, she gave Sam up for adoption, and this woman, Jen Carpenter, just so happened to adopt Sam because she was so obsessed and in love with Billy. Maybe she wanted a piece of him. Now, I know it might sound outlandish, guys. I'm not saying that it's, that's what's going to happen or it's true. I'm just throwing it out there as a possibility, especially given the fact that leading up to this fifth movie, there was a lot of speculation about the love child of Cindy Prescott and Billy Loomis. So that's my take on this situation. Is I think that in so many ways with this piece of dialogue, it does set up for some theories like that to be talked about. And I definitely think it sets up for a greater dynamic in the sixth Scream. And it also in so many ways explains why is Cindy coming back. Her story is not yet over with this franchise. And eventually I'm going to delve into why I believe so. As well as I'm also going to give you a theory that I have about Sam. I mentioned it the other day on my other video that I want to do a theory video about Sam. I have a really crazy theory about Sam that I want to touch on, and this links into it, as well as other scenes in this movie and instances in this movie where it leads into some questions about Sam herself. Alright guys, that's it for this video. If you like this video and if you like this content, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated, as well as hit that notification icon to get all the latest content updates from the channel, as well as follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Once again, this is I Shot Him 6 Times, horror movie YouTube channel. I'm your host Marcus, and I will see you in the next video, guys.